So welcome. Thank you for people that have joined. I know I've had some messages from people saying that can we see it afterwards? Is it going to be recorded? Yes, this is going to come out live afterwards. But we have Emma Hislop here, and we have
Jeremy
Russon.
Hi there.
How are you both?
Good. And you?
Yeah, very well. Jeremy, how's the cat situation?
Yeah. Just before we came online, there was my cat and another cat decided to have a fight outside the window. So yes, just it's down. It looks like it's they've moved apart now, so that's a good thing. I'll let the dog out in a minute. He can sort them out.
Well, that brings us really nicely onto the topics of today, doesn't it? The struggle from home.
Yes.
I'll be honest. In all my research, I didn't see anything about cats fighting, but we can add that to the list of challenges.
I'll tell you another story about a cat in a minute, but that's for the podcast.
Okay, all right, perfect. So just for people who don't know who you are, Emma, would you like to introduce yourself? Jeremy, the same afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah, sure. So I have the very honourable job of hiring talent into BGC Partners. I look after the lateral hires for EMEA and APAC. And prior to that, I had experience for Big Four and investment banking. So that's me.
It's very, very professional sounding, Emma.
Yeah,
I try that.
So I have worked for some big companies, but in the past. But currently work. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of a company called Udder, or the Udder Group, to give us our full title. Myself and Alan Walker. We work with tech companies to help them improve the products that they have, and ultimately to help them to sell more and introduce them to the right buyers. But we also work on the buyer side, so we help companies who are looking to buy and implement technology to make better buying decisions, and it's quite surprising some of the decisions that are made that we've seen. So yes, that's what I do.
Fantastic. And from my side, I'm recruitment. I was recruitment for years and years. I work at a company called Recruited Now, doing selling technology for them, which is potentially something that we could talk about a little bit later, which will come into the technology section. So to give people sort of a basic agenda, we are just going to talk about the challenges from working from home, what some of the solutions to those challenges are, and how technology can help with that, and then jump into a Q&A at the end for any questions that people have. So to start off, you said something quite interesting, Jeremy, when we were discussing this earlier, that I wanted to sort of touch on more. You were talking about the difference between working from home and remote working, because I think there is a distinction there that some people aren't sort of quite aware of. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
So just a bit of context. I did my first, and it was generally remote working role for a company in 2006. Pretty much since then, I've either worked remotely or worked from home, and I'll explain very briefly what I see as the difference. So working remotely is a subset of flexible working, and that's around time and all those sorts of things. And the working remotely bit is that you don't go to a central office every day. There may be one there, but you don't go to it every day. Working from home is then a subset of working remotely. So you might, if you're under a proper strategy, you might have a day where you're working from home, or a day in the office, a day where you might have a shared co-working space that you go to. So I think this is something we have to use the right terminology about, because working from home is not working remotely. They're different things. The other bit that you haven't said there, and I won't use the word that I used, but what we're going through and what a lot of people are going through now is not a working from home strategy. It's working through a crisis. And, I'm lucky. I'm used to this. My wife manages a library. The library's closed. She's on a task force for volunteers in Wiltshire, where we live. And she sat on the kitchen table with a 15-year-old laptop, because that's all they had, trying to, that doesn't even have a webcam. We actually had to go back to the library to get the docking station for her to make it so it's something she could actually work on. And she's struggling at times. And every so often I let her come into the office and I'll go and sit at the table. But it really is something it's not the same, and I think what we have to do is we have to be aware on the other end of a camera that children will walk past the back of you in the kitchen, or the cat will jump up on the table. And that's not people being unprofessional. That's people adapting to a really crappy set of circumstances. Sorry, Emma, I'm sort of monopolising things here. Please feel free to.
No, I agree. I was saying to a friend of mine, actually, I was like, working from home, I find I can be really productive, because working from home for me, like you say, 1 day a week, it's dedicated time, and I have the house to myself. And I purposely make it that way so that I can get on with all of the work that I want to do. Whereas at the moment, the house is, we're on lockdown. So the house is not 100% mine. I'm having to share it with my husband, who's also working. And that is a completely different way of working, a different setup. And we're not at that stage in life at the moment where we both have our own offices. So I'm in the living room. He's still wanting to come in to catch news breaks now and again. So it's a whole other way of working.
It's adapting to your own circumstances. I mean, it might sound very fickle and very, very minimalistic, but my biggest challenge is when I'm working from home normally and there's no one here, I have the door open. And I might have the telly on in the background, and that's my company. But the beauty of that is the dog walks in and out as he chooses. At the moment, I've got the door shut, and I'll be in the middle of a call, and the dog's smacking at the door and starts barking to get in. It is really, it's a strange adaptation. But yeah.
It's been, I had a similar situation. Our company went remote a couple of 2 or 3 months before this all happened. So I was used to it, and like similarly to you, Emma, I had my space. I was always in the kitchen in the same spot, and then the first day working from home, I walked into the kitchen to put my laptop down where I normally work, and my other half had already taken that spot from me. So I've been demoted to the bedroom, and this is that wasn't an argument worth having. So this is where I've stayed ever since. So I think that you're right. There's not where people haven't chosen to be in this situation. No one's chosen to be in this situation. They haven't had time to prepare for it. Luckily I already had a desk and things like that set up. So from your experience, Emma, with your workplace, and we were obviously always remote, and Jeremy, for you as well, what have you found in terms of the challenges have been suddenly having to really quickly go to working from home from working in an office?
They've been quite drastic, actually. Kind of, if you're just going to look at it from that lens, it is quite drastic. As a brokerage, operationally, we're just not used to the workforce being remote. It's something compliance have completely had to change and adapt with. We don't have hot desking either, so it's not like we always had the technology in place where we were used to having thousands of users all logging on at the same time. So technical challenges, compliance challenges. I think for me with a team and kind of senior management as well, when you look at it, whether you're going up or down, the generation differences have been quite apparent. Managers who are used to seeing their staff in the office and used to seeing productivity in front of them. I've certainly had to change my levels of communication, and that goes both ways, up and down, with how often I'm communicating, how often I'm giving assurances, reiterating things, really minor things as well. So from kind of some of the bigger challenges in technology and compliance to some of the minor things like confirming meetings before they're going to happen to make sure that all parties are going to be on that call when they say they're going to be on that call, putting in daily catch-ups with my immediate team to check, right, so what are priorities for the day? Really minor things like that as well.
And is that a trust issue, do you think? Because I've been reading a lot about the difficulties or challenges around people now working from home, trusting their workforce that they are going to be getting done what's done, and moving from a sort of productivity standpoint to an outcome standpoint. So, as long as they are getting done what they're supposed to be getting done during the day, then it's fine. But is it a trust thing? Do you think that's sort of a concern there?
I don't know if I'd blanket it fully with trust. I think there's some of the unknown as well, where it's different. It's a different way of working, and some people won't be used to this way of working. If you're a visual person, you're used to visually seeing people and the work and the outputs. To then suddenly go to an environment where you can't visually see people, and you're not, you're waiting on perhaps email updates for those outputs. It's natural that you're kind of querying, you've got a few more questions than you usually would. So I don't know if I'd blanket it fully with trust, but definitely differences in working, and there is quite a generational shift that's quite apparent, shall we say.
You've got to remember that this is almost, it's essentially a forced transformation without any of the planning that will go into that sort of thing. Everyone is saying this is the basis of a remote working, flexible working strategy. I won't say what I was going to say, but it's for people who are that used to that whole being in the office presenteeism, they've not had a chance to actually get their heads around the fact that they're not going to see their team and their colleagues every day. That's got to be something that is challenging for them. I'm sure there is a trust element to it, completely, but let's not forget this is the crisis element that I talked about, that people just aren't used to working like this, and they're not having a chance to even think about whether they like it or not. They're just having to do it.
Yeah, I guess you don't have a choice, do you? Like that's the thing. We're forced into this right now. From what I was reading and the research I was doing at the weekend around this, there's one thing that keeps coming up over and over again was the loneliness and isolation piece. And one of the things I wanted to sort of put to you two was, do you think it's now the responsibility of companies to pay for or give sort of counselling or paid counselling to people who are suddenly sort of forced into these situations where they may be lonely, maybe isolated, or just maybe psychologically quite happy to go into these situations? Do you think that's companies' responsibility now to help with?
I think it's the duty of care. Whether it's paid counselling or whatever, there's a duty of care owed by the company still, that they had even before this, around the health and well-being of their staff, particularly, and maybe that has stepped up. Maybe that's something else they have to look at. Whether it's specifically paid counselling, I don't know, but there is certainly something there that people have to look at, that companies have to look at. One of the things we did a series of podcasts through Chat Talent, which is one of our brands, and we've had a variety of people on there, and the one that was interesting for me was Joanne Lockwood, who big a D&I. I think the easiest way to describe is D&I consultant, but she's so much more than that. And we talked a lot about the shift in paradigm of the D&I model, I guess, if you like, the D&I culture. Previously, people who were going into a workplace and that wasn't the best place for them to be, this actually is great for them. And we talk a lot about introverted people and that, but actually, for all you know, I could be sat here in a wheelchair. So right. This piece takes away a lot of the traditional D&I challenges, but it creates a new one. So for people who are extroverted, who like going to an office, that's where your challenge is going to come in. That people who would have been classed as privileged, I guess, is the word we used on that podcast, in the workplace traditionally, and now finding it, they're going to be the ones that are going to create the D&I challenge in the future, and from the mental health perspective, particularly.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that to quote one study that I found, they did a study on mice where they took the mice out of their naturally sort of typically highly social structure and put them in isolation away from a group. And what they found was their brain cells showed signs of social interaction atrophy. So in other words, they were separated from their social structure, their brain cells would sort of start dying off. And whether that's because that's something that's sort of more engaging to the brain, or whether that's something that people sort of need, some people need, some people don't, there is going to be sort of an element of sort of, we're not going to know for a long time, how, if it has sort of seriously affected people in any way, I don't think. But I think also on the point of D&I, some people's careers and sort of way they work were all around social interaction, right? Being in a group and sort of throwing to people for ideas, and that's sort of how they built their sort of persona in a work sense. So I think those sort of people, you're right, Jeremy, are going to struggle when it comes from sort of online interaction. Video conferencing, I think our company has a policy where you have to have your video on at all times. And I think that's something that's super important. I don't know, is that the case with you as well, Emma?
Some days yes, some days no. I do try to put my video on as much as possible. But I think going back to your earlier point around, is there a duty of care? When I actually look at the benefits that companies give, a lot of the time there is always a helpline. There is a 24/7 helpline, and if you speak to anybody who works in kind of a benefits function for some of, and I'm talking from experience of bigger corporations here, it's one of the most underutilized services that the company will give, because it's usually such a broad expanse. If it's a 24/7 line, it could be anything from bereavement to financial support to something quite topical now like loneliness. And I've got to say, I'm just as guilty. I'm one of those statistics. I've actually never called it, but I'm sure there's plenty of occasions where I could have. So I definitely think it's worthwhile checking out the full benefits that your company offers to see what's there and what's available.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the benefit system's got to sort of change in that respect. If I don't know, I'm sort of assuming something there. Do we think that this sort of forced remote working right now, working from home, is gonna continue? So I think it was the German Chancellor or someone in Germany today announced that they are pushing forward a law. See if I can find it. They're pushing forward a law where they're going to make flexible working or working from home mandatory for any employee that wants to, that's in a position to. Do you think that that's going to be? Do you think that's going to happen elsewhere around Europe and the world, or not?
I think the key there is that it's the choice of the individual, because actually one of the things that I've seen a lot of is people saying, I don't want to do this. I want to be in an office. I want to have a place to go where I can anchor, where that's work and this is home. And they're two completely different locations. So it's quite pleasing to hear. Will we get it in over here? Who knows?
That's a crystal ball one.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
It was the German Labour Minister. He's making working from home a legal right in Germany. What they're putting forward, that. not gone through yet, but they're putting forward that. But I think that's the last thing that you said there, Jeremy, is super important as well. Is keeping home and work separate. One of the other things that people were talking about a lot was the feeling of being left out. The feeling of being left out of what's going on. A lot of people's sort of social circles are their work friends. You spend typically 8 to 10 hours a day with the same people, and if that's the case, then they typically are the people you spend most of the time talking about or to. And I think that now that sort of social interaction has been taken away, I think that's going to be a big challenge for people. What do you think? The percent? Do you personally, Emma, if you had the choice to work from home every day, would you?
Sorry, your voice, the sound's gone. Give me a second.
No worries. Do you work from home most of the time, Jeremy?
So my home is my office. So if I'm working with clients and there's expenses involved, it's from when I leave the office. But going back to when I worked for a large, employed by a large finance company, and this is one of the things that you have to think about when you're doing remote working. Contractually, when I went to remote working, they had to change my contract so that my home was my home office. So the office. So whenever I went out the door, it was expensed. Whereas if your contract states the office is, I don't know, number 1 Ludgate Circus, if you're then remote working, every time you go somewhere, you have to take off the cost of traveling to Ludgate Circus. So just as an example, that's a sort of one of the things that people have to think about. But yeah, ultimately, to answer your question, my home is where my office is, but I'm lucky in that I have a dedicated office. That's not always the case, but it's not a straightforward thing for any company coming out of this to be setting up a remote working strategy. And yeah. I think, have we lost Emma? Or
yeah, we have. I'm just trying to get Emma back on. Once, bear with me. And then add Emma. There we go. So yeah, hopefully Emma's
back. Yeah.
Oh, says accepting. What are the challenges of working from home?
Yes, absolutely. It's the right technology. It absolutely is. No, we joke about it, but absolutely, it has to be the right technology. So going back to the wife, she's expected to be on webinars and things with her team, and she hasn't got a camera on her laptop.
Right.
So then what do? Do you buy the camera? And hope you get the money back. So
this is another thing I'm thinking about. Is it also now the responsibility of companies to pay for people's desks and chairs from an ergonomic standpoint? Because if you're working in an office previously and someone had a back problem, you could potentially be sued by that employee because the chairs that you provided for the company weren't the right sort of. Hello.
Cool. Go on. Yeah, it's a good question. It all comes down to, probably comes down to duty of care thing, doesn't it? And certainly in terms of health and safety, you'd be expecting the company in some way to do a risk assessment of your workstation and make adaptations as required, which in the office space might be about the right type of chair or the right type of desk. So yeah, it's interesting. I think
so. Emma, the question I posed was, do you now think, because we were talking about people's home offices, do you now think it's if you're in an office situation, so you've got a bad back or the chairs or anything that they provided, the computer or the desk is at the wrong height, and you end up having some sort of injury or some sort of back problem from that, you can potentially be sued for that by that employee, right? So is it also now the responsibility of companies to be ensuring that people have suitable places to work from home, whether that be buying them a desk, a chair, or obviously the right sort of equipment from laptops or computers?
Wow, that is a good one. We actually, for the most of my career, I've worked on a bring your own device policy.
Okay.
And I wonder how much, if you're working on a bring your own device policy where the organisation are not supplying the perhaps technical equipment for you to kind of log into, does that extend then to your workstation as well? If you are actively choosing not to go into a designated office, that's a really interesting one. I think we're perhaps too soon into the changes. I haven't seen any kind of big changes. I think there'll still be the need for an office. I like what you brought with the changes Jimmy are proposing. I think that's really interesting. And like you said, Jeremy, that's optional. I think that is the key part there.
Yeah.
So I've got some statistics here that I thought were quite interesting that I shared with you, Emma, previously around how people feel about their what the sort of the main things why people like to work from home, and then the issues they have around it. So the benefits that people, let's find it, the benefits of remote work. So 90% of people said this. Bear in mind, this was just before everyone was forced into remote working. 90% of people reported their family and personal life improved. Do you think that's still the case now that everyone is working from home and that's been everyone's been forced into this environment?
Just say the stat again. So 90% of people
reported their family and personal life improved
when they started working from home.
Yeah.
It's probably different now. I would suspect. Because actually a lot of the people who would, if you put that survey out now, a lot of the people would probably answer it from a perspective of they hadn't planned to work from home. So I would suspect it's a little bit different.
And the next one is 85% said their stress was reduced. And then the next one is 80% said that their morale and engagement improved. So I'm not sure where these statistics came from, but I can understand the morale and engagement improving, given that people have more flexibility around their working. But that sort of brings me on to my next point. Should working hours change?
I guess there's a simple answer is yes, but of course there's the caveat around that, which is you have to take account of clients, you have to take account of the fact that you can't. I don't think you can blanket it. Is the key thing. If you think of retail, okay, there's people can't dictate what time they're going to go and work in a shop.
Yeah.
They can't dictate what time they're going to go and work in a hospital. So you can't blanket say, yes, it will change. I think it's about the industry, it's about the company. But certainly companies that have the capability to provide flexibility of working hours should be considering that as a strategy, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to one of the original points where it's more about outcome. My sort of not issue with that, but the thing you need to still have that interaction during the day. So I find that right now, since we've been remote working, more of my day is taken up with Google Meets and Zoom calls than normally would have been, and I feel like that sometimes would negatively impacts the amount of my productivity during the day. Do you find, I know you're working from remote before, Jeremy, but Emma, do you find that you're spending much more time on these online meetings than you would have been working previously, or is it about the same?
Massively. So my husband made an interesting comment. He was like, you just don't want to speak to me anymore, Emma. And I think it's not that I'm seeing much more of him right now, but I think it's that I'm now spending on average kind of 7 to 8 hours either on video or on phone calls to people. Whereas if I'm in the office, that's just not the case, because there is some downtime where I'm physically at my desk and I'm working. But I think kind of, as we said earlier, where you've got different generations that are being forced into this remote working, it's very different to traditional ways of working, for perhaps more of the traditional organisations, and they're just not used to it. So I'm having to spend a lot of time preparing people for meetings, or if it's writing up minutes and meeting notes, but I'm doing that and I'm doing a lot of it kind of face to face or on the phone. So I'm not getting through as much, I suppose, work, if you like, that's kind of just me and a laptop getting the work done that I need to do. I'm spending a lot more time on the phone and videoing. And then obviously in the evenings, I just don't want to do that with my husband. I want to have some quiet time.
I think it was the other day I was sat on the settee and I picked up the phone and went to Zoom my wife, who was sat next to me. That's a joke. But it has come to that. It does seem to be all we do. I would say that compared to how I was before, my most productive time was at home, because if I'm on a client site or something, there's always that question coming in, or if I was working for a company, there's always that ability for someone just to walk up to your desk and say, "Can you got a couple of minutes to talk about this?" And it's an hour.
Yeah.
Whereas you don't have that if you're working from home. You can actually, in an 8-hour day, in the office, I could do probably in 4 hours from home, the same amount of work roughly before this. But with Zoom, it's a challenge because you do have to get there's the introduction piece at the beginning of the Zoom call and the end of I don't think we're as productive, and it's more tiring. I think it's probably more stressful being on Zoom calls rather than meetings when it's all you're ever doing.
I agree. I think it comes down to a bit of a communication piece, doesn't it? Because it's, whatever the communication is with people, if it's a Zoom call, typically, naturally, people will interrupt each other, not in a rude way, if they're in a room together.
Yeah.
When we're doing a call like this, because there's a slight delay, everyone has to make sure they've stopped talking before the next person starts talking, and that is just completely different to how people interact in the real world. And that elongates calls. It also makes potentially, it's really difficult to, if you're quite a sarcastic or sort of person, and you're sending messages, you've got to really remember that people aren't going to be able to see that sarcasm anymore when you're sending that over Slack. And I'm sure that's got some people in some trouble so far.
Like Donald Trump. The sarcasm piece,
He called it sarcasm, didn't he?
He did. Yeah. Drink bleach. I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, he said, I was being sarcastic just to mess with you reporters, I think he said, something like that.
That's exactly it. There we go. That's not working from home. That was,
Yeah, it's just, I was just being sarcastic. So this is a good other point. Unplugging from work. So one of the biggest struggles people have in remote working, from another study that I'm reading, was unplugging from after work, because I'm used to working from home. I know how to sort of shut off after work. I change my clothes, etc. I think that's some people are struggling with that right now, because people feel like there's more access to you when you're at home. Because if all you're doing is calling someone, then there's no real, when do I stop calling that person right now? I think I think that's sort of part of the issue. What do you guys think?
I worked for a phenomenal female at one time, and she was incredibly good at, even if she was working later hours, she would delay send all of the emails so that they only came to the team or to us in working hours. And I had the utmost respect for her for doing that. And only kind of imposing the work on us as a team then in working hours. And I think now more than ever, those tips and those tricks to work in are really important, because now that you are at home and you don't have that defined cut-off time or that downtime period where you're perhaps commuting from one to the other, you really do have to be quite strict with your working hours to make sure that actually you don't look up and suddenly it's 10, 11 o'clock at night and you haven't put your laptop away yet.
Yeah. From personal perspective, I'm actually better. I've actually got better over the last month, because obviously I work for myself anyway, so actually time essentially is money. And I think there were times where I could quite easily stop for tea and then take the laptop out of the office and go and sit in front of the telly whilst the kids and wife are watching a movie, and be present but not be present.
Yeah.
What I have done better is at 5 o'clock, and you have to, because of the stress and the mental stress of being on, actually physical stress of being on Zoom calls all day, because they are. I have to stop at 5, and I literally walk out the office, shut the office door, and then realise the dog's sitting there and have to open it again to let him out. He is. I think it's. I love the idea of the delayed send, Emma. I think there are some things that leaders and managers of people will need to look at in the future, if indeed we do all go to a much more remote workforce. And tips like that will be really, really important for managers and leaders to look at, in terms of how they manage their team remotely and lead their teams remotely, because I think those are really important. Setting that example where she didn't have to tell you that she'd done that email at 11 o'clock at night, but because you received it at 8 o'clock the next morning, you didn't feel compelled to reply to it when it came in at 11 o'clock the night the night before she hadn't have been doing that. I think there'll be a complete industry that comes up about how to lead and manage from a remote workforce. Well, we've seen it already, definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, I completely agree. I think I love the sort of delaying the email to send out is such a nice, and presumably she never mentioned it, but you just like you said, Jeremy,
you just kind of know.
Yeah.
What amazing thing to do. I think that's some great advice. I think that's also brings me on to something else I wanted to discuss, which was, how do you structure people's days? So as a manager, how would you are you doing a check-in once a day? Are you doing 2 a day? What's effective and what's now considered sort of more micromanaging your staff now that you can't constantly see them across the room?
Emma, I don't have any team. So other than Alan, who wouldn't listen to me anyway. So you might have to answer that, and then I'll give my thoughts on it afterwards.
Okay, so rightly or wrongly, what I'm doing at the moment, so I do a 9 o'clock check-in, and it's turned into something really quite nice, within everyone's got their cup of coffee, tea, mint tea, whatever the case is, and it's really just kind of a capacity. What are the priorities of the day? A lot of it spills over from the day before or the week before.
Yeah.
But it's really helping with that reprioritization, and as new work comes in or new tasks come in, it's reprioritizing what people are working on, and then I cascade that up as well to management, so that kind of over communication of what people are focusing on, even if it's a couple of bullet points is in, this is the kind of structure of the week, these are the priorities we've got, and each day as it changes, just sending that on. I think over communication at the moment is important. And then just at the end of the week, we are doing a video where we are highly encouraging that everyone do the video call so you can see everybody at the end of the week. And it's not anything structured. It's not to run through the achievements of the week or what's been accomplished. It's more just that social point of, right, what are people going to be doing for the weekend? And the small chat that you just don't get anymore now that you're not in an office, and that's been really valuable.
Yeah. I think the key thing there, Emma, was that there's different types of check-in, aren't there? There's the check-in about work, but I think you have to have that social check-in. And I was speaking to some managers who once a day are just picking up the phone for 5 minutes to their staff, literally just to say, "How you doing?"
Yeah.
And you're right, and that sort of communication levels has had to increase. And go on. Sorry.
No, sorry. Go on, Jeremy.
No, I was just going to say that's really important. Is that the amount of times you're communicating, because you're not having those water cooler chats and things like that, and seeing people or having lunch with people. That's really important. I think there's a couple of teams I've seen where they've actually had team lunches as well and things like that. And I think those sorts of things actually do really help. I think just to sit there over, have a sandwich with your colleagues like you would have done on a Friday in the, in the local Pret or in the cafe or whatever it is. It's important to continue those things.
Absolutely. I think one of the best pieces of advice I saw online was, don't forget the small talk at the beginning of each call. So if you're jumping on a call and it's a work-related call and you're talking about whatever project you're doing, just don't forget to have a quick chat first, like you would if you're walking into a meeting room or you're walking to a meeting room. Don't forget that small talk, because then your day just seems so. You're going from this call to this call to this call with no social interaction. Really, you're just focused on work, and that's gonna really bring people down. So that focus on small talk, I think, is super, super important at the beginning of ech call.
Yeah. We have it's not a work thing, but it's we have a call. I'm one of 6, so 4 sisters and a brother, and we have a webinar on a Saturday night, which is immensely fun because there's about 30 of us with all the kids and things on it. But at the beginning, one of the things we do say is, "What's the funniest thing you've seen on a video call this week?" And it's amazing what goes on. And I referred to the cat story earlier. I'll tell you that because it is quite amusing. I was on a call with the HRD of a global organisation, and there was, I think, 15 of us on the call. And he sat at home in New York, and his cat jumps up and lies down in front of him. He says, he's stroking it like this, and halfway through the call, the cat decided it had had enough, got up, turned round, and literally stuck its backside in the camera. So we got this, and it was, and it. I told this story on the family chat, and for about 5-6 minutes, we just couldn't stop laughing.
Oh God, that's terrible.
And then my dog did the same thing on the call. And
no way.
Stood up in front of because we're on the telly. I stood up in front of it, and there was the dog's backside. Yeah, but the reason for telling that story is it is sometimes about that small talk, the sense of humour, and we need a sense of humour to get through this.
Absolutely. We do it. My family did our first one of those calls on Sunday. So we were all, and it was one of the most entertaining things in the world, trying to watch my mum and dad try and work out Zoom. It's so funny.
Neil, my mum and dad are probably about 30 years older than yours, so that was amusing. Yeah,
it was super interesting. So I think this is really important to talk about is the technologies that people are using to communicate. Zoom obviously have done a fantastic. It's almost they're becoming a Hoover, aren't they? They're becoming so synonymous with conference calls that people are saying, "Do you want to go on a Zoom?" Even when it could be Google Meet now, and I think they've done an amazing job at marketing that. But we use Google Meet, we use Slack, we have a recruitment technology that is all about it's a cloud-based recruitment technology that people can use in the recruitment industry. What technology are you guys using, Emma, at the moment to help with communication?
We're using Microsoft Teams, which I've got to say has been excellent. Really, really good. But I do think for slightly more traditional organizations, this will be a great opportunity for better technology. Like, I'm really hopeful, fingers crossed, for things like DocuSign and technologies that are just going to make a difference in allowing for that working from home. We still have some instances where an ink signature is required. And how are you going to do that unless you're going to see the person? So really looking forward to some of these technical changes. I think big opportunity for organizations to look at the way that they interact with technology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I think I can't remember what it was like before having Slack. I can't remember the days where you'd have to send an email and wait X amount of time for someone to sort of reply, and they'd have that, not excuse, but they'd have that reason that, I didn't see the email. Whereas on Slack, you can see people online and you can constantly engage. So to anyone that is looking at implementing those sort of technologies, Slack and Microsoft Teams, very similar platforms, both really, really fantastic at that. And they are, I don't know about Microsoft Teams, but I know that Slack is free unless you want to record all your data. So definitely something worth looking into. Zoom as well, I think, is doing a lot of free trials right now. If they aren't, they should be. And Google Meet is obviously free. What do you use did you say you use Zoom for your Google conferencing, Emma?
No, everything is Microsoft Teams. So
okay.
Very, very kind of similar, I imagine, the setup to. It is very similar to Zoom, but it's very similar, I imagine, to Slack, which I haven't actually used. But you can invite as many people in as you want. You can use shared drives. You can download documents for all of you to see on various meetings. You can have as many people as you want presenting, and as many people joining where you can see their videos. So yeah, really, really enjoying it. It's I'm glad we had it in prior to this crisis.
Yeah, definitely. What is there any advice either of you have about setting up any sort of technology, or any technology you've used that might sort of help or help any other organizations or managers setting up their workforce?
It's kind of really strange because I've worked for so long in this format. I couldn't even tell you what's good, because it's just I went through that 7 or 8 years ago. I have to be honest. I'm gonna say and upset Emma here. I find Teams when I'm using it, where companies have implemented it as part of their IT strategy, I actually find that the quality of the call and the video and the voice not as good, if I'm honest, as Zoom. I'm a Zoom fan, but then we were using it for however long before it became the trendy thing to do. But yeah, I think that there's things that we don't think about that we do naturally. So I've used DocuSign for however long, and I think you're completely right. That is such an obvious win. But I think there's also a lot of around the hardware, isn't there? So you've got to have the right hardware in place with a decent camera and decent microphone. My laptop doesn't have a great microphone. Headphones are brilliant. There's going to be a massive run in the market for decent headphones with a decent microphone. There's those sorts of things that we'll see grow in the future. Interesting to see that Facebook have launched, I didn't see the exact details, but a platform that will rival Zoom in terms of the numbers of people who can go on it as a stable video platform. And I think at the moment it's at 50, but and I think it's free. That's the other thing. So I didn't get a chance to read the full report, but there's certainly companies will be looking and going, what should we be doing so that if this happens again in the future, or if the outcome from this is many more people working from home, what do we have to do?
Yeah, I think it's already a strain on the infrastructure, right? I don't know about anyone else, but my building right now, I live in a block of flats, and there's 250 people. And the internet is constantly having sort of issues and problems, especially last week. One day it was just sort of down all the time. And I imagine it's going to be a very similar issue across the UK right now. And also very similar for people like Zoom, or anyone getting into this space, having Zoom right now, if you've got a free account, you can only get 40 minutes. I imagine that's for that very reason. They can't be giving that bandwidth out to everyone. It's just not feasible. But Facebook, if anyone can do that and has the bandwidth, then it's probably them.
Absolutely. I interviewed on one of our podcasts Richard Hutchinson, who's head of TA at City Fibre. They have a really it's an interesting challenge in many ways. They're one of the sort of open reach Virgin Media City Fibre who are rolling out 5G to the UK. And he said clearly what the government have realised is that those three companies are really key to the infrastructure when we come out of this. With that many more people are going to be working at home and things like that, they're really important. To the extent that the guys that dig up the roads in those companies or dig up the pavements have been classified as key workers, so that they can continue to do that job now. His biggest challenge is that as soon as they get two guys out, or whoever it is, out digging up a road, they get complaints from the residents about why these people are not, why are they doing their job? No one else can do their job. And it's quite surprising to think of people who dig up a road as key workers. But now's the ideal time to do it because no one's out.
That's a very good point as well. Yeah, when are you ever going to get that much access to the roads without any cars on it? Yeah.
And pavements without people on it and things like that. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Okay, great. I mean, is there anything that, I know I've been asking all the questions, is there anything that you two wanted to talk about specifically or bring up from your side?
It's just a comment that I heard, and it's something we should be thinking about. I had a conversation with Sam Smith at Kelly OGC from OCG, right the way around, sorry, during the week. And I said to Sam something along the lines of, we're all in this together. And she said, I don't often disagree with you, but I am going to disagree on that one. And she said, we're basically in the same storm, but we've all got different ships. Yeah. She said the challenges that you're facing, and I told the story about the dog knocking on the door and barking and things, is your challenge. She said, but it's very different to the person who's stuck in a one-bedroom flat with two kids or whatever it might be, and to the school teacher friend of ours 2 doors down who's a single mum with three teenage kids. We've all got different challenges, and I think we shouldn't forget that. I think that's really, and it really made me think about, what my challenge is very different to what Emma's is. to what yours is, Neil. So I think that's really important to remember.
I think that's a fantastic, really fantastic point. Emma, is any last things you'd like to say or bring up?
God, I wish I thought of something now.
I mean, the reason I'm asking you to is because I haven't thought of something. So I'm
like you, Neil.
No, I'm going to defer to Jeremy and just add on that taking a little bit more time. I'm actually really enjoying. I think all my values are actually changing through this crisis. I'm valuing other things more so than what I would have used to. And I think taking the time to speak to people, to give that bit of extra time that you wouldn't usually give, is incredible, and definitely learning things from this I'll take forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think from my side, thank you both for giving me some ideas. And from my side, I think, and I agree with both those points. I think the importance from sort of a managerial workforce standpoint is just making sure that what you said, Jeremy, everyone's in a different boat, right? And trying to be as sort of understanding and empathetic as you can under everyone's sort of circumstances, and just talk to people more. I think, one of the things that I've been doing a lot more is I've been doing longer and more often one-to-ones with the team. And I think that's something that's really, really key. And opening up one-to-ones, not just to be work related, but also to be around if they want to, obviously don't pry, but if they want to more about their sort of personal situation, their work from home situation, and make sure you have those conversations rather than sort of hoping that it's all okay. That's the advice I give. Yeah. But that's it for today. Thank you so much, Emma and Jeremy, for your time and coming on. I really appreciate it. And I'll be posting this out probably at some point tomorrow.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
Thank you, Neil.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks,
See
guys.
ya.
Bye-bye.